The one thing all ants have in common is society. These are wood ants. 4-inch-long weaver ants have to make their nests themselves. They build them out of leaves. They turn the leaves into green chambers with floors, walls, and ceilings. The way they do it is with glue. First, some of the ants turn themselves into living safety pins, pulling the leaves together and holding them there. That's one team. Next come the weavers. They pick up larvae, their yet unformed little sisters, take them to the seams and use them like living shuttles, tiny glue guns. They stimulate them to secrete threads of sticky web-like silk that holds the leaves together. Without any apparent supervision, the ants know exactly where to clamp the leaves and where to apply the silk. There are 500,000 ants in the colony, but they behave as though they were all part of a single mind, each one doing what's needed in the right way to build a complex of chambers and corridors out of living leaves. What kind of animals are these? What kind of intelligence? Only one species of human. There are thousands of different species of ant. Each one is a finely tuned specialist, exquisitely adapted to its own. Mandibles are as important to an ant as our hands are to us, depending on the species. The pliers. They're foragers, predators that go out, find food, and bring it back to the nest. Even though each ant is strong, capable of carrying twice her own body weight, a lot of the prey is just too big for one ant. In which case, there's teamwork. It's not size, it's not speed, it's not even strength that makes ants what they are. It's this, the teamwork. Hundreds of thousands of cooperating insects spreading through the woodland like a huge digestive tract, pulling anything edible toward ants had wings. And one of those was a wasp. A solitary wasp, living like many wasps that still exist today, stinging and leaving prey paralyzed for its offspring to eat. In time, some of these wasps started building their nests in clusters, probably to help deter predators. They were still essentially solitary, though, and their offspring left the nest as soon as they could fly. Then, millions of years later, appeared wasps whose offspring, daughters, didn't fly the nest. They grew up there and helped their mother raise more daughters. They became purely their mother's helpers, and didn't themselves reproduce. Over time, these wasps began to look more like ants. They lost their wings, and evolved the disinfecting glands so that cramped underground living wasn't an invitation to disease. They hung on to their powerful wasp jaws and stings, though, and were among the fiercest predators around by the time the dinosaurs appeared. Ants not only saw a lot of individual dinosaurs come and go, they saw the end of the whole dinosaur dynasty. And ants have been ruling the world ever since.
Do ants really communicate with one another? And the answer is, of course they do. Tiny animals in the dark, a lot of the time in closed spaces, it's very difficult, obviously, to communicate by sight. So it's difficult to evolve systems to allow you to as close to what might be the kind of communication system we would find on another planet. I have here. And extracting the material the ants use to lay odor trails that they follow.
World. It is a sophisticated language of smell, an entire vocabulary of chemical signals and messages.
Ants detect smell.
Tell insider from outsider. All the members of this weaver ant colony smell the same. Weaver ants from other colonies, even though they're the same species and look exactly the same, smell subtly different. What happens to an ant with that difference is not subtle. It doesn't matter what you look like, as long as you've got that membership smell. A fact a jumping spider dines out on. It has evolved the ability to mimic the smell of the weaver ant colony it lives with. Then it can roam freely among the ants, picking and choosing juicy meals. The soft, fat larvae are best. A weaver ant confronts what, as far as she's concerned, is one of her sisters. The ant's just doing her job, carrying a larva from one place to another. And here's a sister ant that's bigger and stronger than it ought to be, and doing something it really ought not to be doing. But the smell is kosher, and while there's cause for confusion, there's none for alarm. Despite the occasional counterfeiter, though, Smell is overwhelmingly useful to an ant. These ants, called cataglyphus from foraging, nothing stops them, not temperatures of 130 degrees, and not burning sand. The ants scavenge for creatures that have succumbed to heat exhaustion. When food is found, the ant must return home as quickly as possible to avoid a similar death. Getting lost could be lethal. Not all ants are predators or scavengers. These are the leafcutter ants of Central and South America, and they're a farming community, and they were farming 50 million years before we ever were. They don't farm the plants whose leaves they're actually cutting. No, these are wild plants growing within a 200-yard radius of the ant's nest. The ants cut out sections of leaves and carry them like sails to the nest. There, the leaves are handed over to other ants, which clean them and cut them into smaller pieces. They're then weed it, harvest it, and feed it to the other ants.
They do it to protect themselves. But because the leafcutter's fungus is able to neutralize most plant poisons, the ants themselves will take almost anything back to the nest. It's a big advantage. They can cut whatever's handy. But there's a failsafe. Just in case some plant makes a poison that the fungus can't handle, the porters are always careful to stay to separate pathways, to deliver to separate entrances and separate farmyards. So if something deadly is introduced to the nest, it only ever affects part of the colony. And if part of the colony dies, it doesn't matter. The colony just expands in another direction. Another potential problem is wild fungi. The ants have created perfect conditions for their own domesticated variety. To keep a hardy wild species from invading and taking over, they apply weed killer. It comes from the metaphloral glands, the same glands that all ants use to...
Like us, like human beings, have evolved to live in highly organized societies where contagious disease takes hold very easily and very quickly. And of course that applies equally to people and to ants.
For instance, that ants collecting nectar from mulberry trees have a secret. It's a secret that gets the ants through the hard, dry times, which is most of the time in the vast interior of Australia. They store the mulberry nectar in underground pots, living pots. They're ants whose existence serves one purpose, to receive nectar from their sisters and fill their abdomens with it. They don't drink much of it themselves, they just keep it and regurgitate it when it's needed, hanging from the roof of their underground nest like subterranean grapevines. First, the ground's dry and the storage ants, which are called honey. The digger has to dig down beside the storage chamber, not through it. Pots have to be prized out gently so that they don't burst. In the end, the energy spent digging out the ants is probably greater than English woodland. It's not the warmest place in the world, and the wood ants that live here have to build their nests with that in mind. As insects, ants are cold-blooded animals, which really means that they're the same temperature as the air around them. But wood ants have ways of bending that rule. They use architecture, thatching, lots of thatching, pine needles, leaf stems, and twigs that to them are the size of tree trunks. They pile the stuff up in a mound about 3 feet high and shaped so that it absorbs maximum warmth from the sun. But the ants have a way of raising the temperature inside the mound even further. When the sun's shining, the ants come outside and sunbathe. They soak up the heat and take it down inside the nest with them, using their bodies as little radiators. The wood ants turn a stack of twigs into a world with its own independent climate. There are even internal variations, with the warmest parts in the center. One reason the heat is necessary is that the delicate larvae have to be kept at a more or less constant 74 degrees. And as the heat in the nest goes up and down and shifts throughout the mound, the nurse ants, carrying the larvae, have to keep chasing that perfect temperature from chamber to chamber. What wood ants have done for themselves is to open up natural barriers. Their heating system means that they can live in parts of the world that, by rights, are too cold for ants. Another kind of forest, a tropical one in Australia. And hanging high in the canopy and made of glued-together leaves, a nest of rattle ants. Inside, it looks like ant business as usual. If it weren't for the green floor, these could be any ants underground. Except, what are these big things? They're not larvae, at least not of ants. This is a caterpillar of the small oak blue butterfly, and it has a little nozzle on its back. From it comes a nourishing liquid called honeydew, which the ants collect like dairy farmers. By being useful to the ants, the caterpillars gain their protection. And they're useful for more than just their honeydew. Up on the roof, danger. The caterpillar seems to sense the spider. It signals on the leaf floor. The ants become agitated and prepare for battle, flexing themselves and getting their weapons ready. They peek out to see what the actual danger is. A spider. And then it's all mandibles on deck. They spray at it and drum the leaf, making the sound that gives rattle ants their name. exit spider. There seems to be a thing.
But the problem here is that if you're a caterpillar and you're producing a reward, what stops the ant from simply going, thank you very much, and turning around and going back to the nest? One of the more fascinating things that the caterpillars use to keep ants with them is that they produce a call.
He noticed that they had two rod-like appendages right above their head, stuck into their collar. Called vibratory papillae, these beat up and down on top of the head, and the head itself moves in and out.
The caterpillars, with their calls, are effectively deceiving the ants, because the caterpillars are talking in ant language.
So the caterpillars talk to the ants, and the ants protect them and milk them. It's a good deal for both. Except that somehow the relationship between this caterpillar and the rattle ants has developed a strange twist. The caterpillar eats the ants' larvae. Most caterpillars eat leaves, and in a way it's lucky this one doesn't, or the ants would literally be out of house and home. But it does seem strange when what amounts to your cow dines on your children. It's been going on for millions of years, though, and both species have obviously survived. Australian weaver ants are a normally fearsome spider that has wandered onto the wrong leaf. The ants don't care what reputation a creature has. If it comes too close to their nest, it's simple cause and result. They attack by clinging to the leaf with special claws on their feet, pin their victim down, carve it up, and take it back to their nest. What enables ants to behave this way in perfect cooperation is that they all have exactly the same instinctive response to the same set of events. They're programmed. It's their strength, but also sometimes their weakness. And this little Thomasid spider, which looks like nothing compared to the monster spider the ants have just dismantled, knows how to hack into the ants' program. It not only smells like a weaver ant, it looks something like one too. The ants tolerate its presence. This spider does not spin a web. It has other ways of hunting. The lethal bite. And the patient wait. Ants, with their social organization, can be the most effective predators on Earth, but cross their wires, and they're pushovers. Some kinds of ants, though, are never pushovers. No predator would take on these ants. Army ants. There are about 500,000 in this bivouac. The whole colony, including somewhere in the middle, the queen. On the march. These ants can barely see, blindly following chemical trails laid down by their nestmates. They take everything edible in their path. And there's very little anything else can do about it. You could say they're a mob, but more organized and more single-minded. To the wasps watching the pillage of their nest, this colony might be a huge amoeba with tendrils spreading through the forest. But more than an amoeba, too, because each of these ants has a brain. Not a very big brain, but all of their processing power added together gives them a kind of collective intelligence. Is that what ants are? A big, many-legged brain? Professor Nigel Franks.
That could be. Because people think that they're so well organized, they think that they must tell the workers what they have to be doing.
But most ants, it seems, are organized from the bottom up, rather than the top down. No one ant is in control. The individuals organize themselves. It's almost like anarchy that works. It's a formidable evolutionary strategy.
I think what is interesting about it will go back to all its nestmates. A single worker can count all the way back of the bridge, and then they both look round the new home, and if they're both happy, the whole thing snowballs until we've got this enormous stream of traffic from the old colony to the new one.
When the whole colony is safe inside the new nest, some of the workers begin building a protective wall across the entrance. Rings of sand become huge boulders in the jaws of these tiny ants.
And tremble it in. But essentially they've built a very beautiful retaining wall, and they put it in exactly the right place. So even though this might seem a very odd thing for a scientist to look at, we're looking at how, I think that's a really major principle throughout the whole of biology.
Ants are supremely organized, yet there's no hierarchy, no one ant in command. Their organization is unique. Ants are always at the grassroots of the problem they're trying to solve. Each ant is part of the decision-making process. It's the way they've been solving problems for 100 million years.